it would be better if anybody interested in Roman military history could have personal experience about being a legionary. Well, I guess it's impossible nowadays, so we are limited to reading books and making models such as this one.
There is an important similarity that connects modern European armies to the most important reforms ever undertaken by the armies of ancient Rome. Reforms that actually enabled the Romans to go out and conquer most of the known world. These reforms were initiated in 107 BC by a Roman general and politician, Gaius-Marius, thus becoming known as the Marian Reforms. The main change they introduced was to turn the army from a temporary, voluntary service into a permanently employed, professional, standing army. Modern European nations may have varying approaches to military service, but it's all turning the Marius way very quickly, and conscription is giving way to professional armies, where privates and corporals have full-time employment and retirement plans. There are smaller than national service armies, thus being different to what Marius did, but the rest is basically the same. Soldiers who spend their whole professional lives training for combat, and many times more efficient in real combat situations than somebody who has only trained for a year, then forgets everything as quickly as he can, and who didn't even want to join the services in the first place. A 1st to 2nd century legionary was armed with 1 or 2 javelins, the heavier pilum and the lighter verutum, a short sword called the gladius, and a dagger, the pugio. He wore a heavy helmet, the galea, segmented body armour, lorica-segmentata, and carried a large rectangular shield, the scutum. The Marian reforms severely limited the numbers of pack animals, usually mules, available to legionaries because luggage trains impaired the mobility of the army. Soldiers therefore had to carry all they could of themselves, and that usually meant 30 to 40 kilograms, hence they were soon given the nickname of Marius Mules. When marching on campaign, a legionary had to carry his armour, weapons, and his marching pack, the sarcina. This included 14 days of food rations, water skin, woolen coat, 2 small pots for cooking, and a share of engineering equipment, for example a spade, a pickaxe, or a big wicker basket. He would also carry 2 sudes-murales, wooden stakes used for setting temporary modular barriers to protect the marching camps. Sarcina and other equipment would be carried on special T-shape ended sticks. These would be crossed with pilums, with both carrying sticks and pilums resting on soldiers' shoulder armour to distribute the weight evenly. Helmets had a special carrying handle and would be carried tied to the front of the armour to balance the load. The armament, armour and equipment of individual soldiers was designed for team action, not for individual initiative, but tight formations and perfect coordination achieved through constant training. Tactics, armament and armour were copied from the numerous enemies that Rome fought against. Fas est et ab hoste doceri. It is decent to learn even from the enemy, for example, throwing javelins and then gripping the sword just before clashing with the enemy. It's thought to be a tactic used first by light Spanish infantry, whereas heavy helmet design is taken from the Gauls. The helmet had large ear openings because coordinated actions depended on understanding orders shouted amidst the roar and din of battle. Rectangular shields were made from overlapping layers of wood glued together, quite high-tech for that time. The shield was heavy and far from optimum for individual fighters, but perfect for forming the uniform wall of shields protecting whole units. The pilum, the most efficient weapon of a Roman legionary, doesn't look much at first glance. Basically a heavy javelin about 2 meters long, with a thick wooden shaft and a thin iron shank, weighing between 2 and 4 kilograms. The pilum had a limited range of 15 to 20 meters, but because of its weight, it had huge kinetic energy which was concentrated in a tiny pyramidal head. The shape of the head looks as if it came from a modern steel-cutting tool catalogue, and that was indeed its purpose. Modern experimental archaeology has proven that it would penetrate all types of armour of that period, with a large energy surplus. In other words, the pilum could easily pass through one armoured enemy soldier and still strike the soldier behind him. The thin iron shank offered no resistance, and so the pilum could pierce a shield and still hit its bearer. The pilum can also be considered a programmed single-use weapon because, while the iron point was hardened, the shank was not, and therefore it bent after hitting. Any shield weighted with a 2-meter long heavy stick was instantly useless and had to be discarded. A bent pilum was very difficult to remove quickly, and more importantly thrown back. Timing was crucial because hand-to-hand combat followed within seconds. Large shields and short swords were specifically designed for coordinated fights in a crowded battlefield. Long Gallic swords would provide an advantage in individual hand-to-hand combat, but were difficult to wield in a crowd. Roman legionaries knew how to use their coordinated maneuvering abilities to the maximum, and would often reverse the roles of their equipment, hitting the enemy formations with their shields, whilst keeping their short swords behind them. One typical Roman drill was a rhythmical push made of the wall of shields, followed by a step forward and a quick downward or forward hit with the relatively light sword. Modern reenactors try to show another very popular and very Roman kind of formation, a turtle, testudo, where the whole unit forms an armed box, with shields closely protecting soldiers from all sides, and forming a roof of shields above them. As spectacular as the testudo appears, in fact, although it was practiced, it was actually used very, very rarely. It was tiring, it was impossible to use weapons, it could lead to soldiers' disorientation, and so it was only used during sieges when, for example, marching under fire from the walls towards the breach.